Welcome to Innovation in Government. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Tricia Fitzmaurice, the Regional Manager for Federal Law Enforcement and Justice at Red Hat. Welcome, Tricia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Some say hybrid cloud is the best of both worlds. Agencies can move those applications that are considered cloud ready into a commercial or government cloud while keeping software that needs to be modernized or is so old that it can never be cloud ready on premise in a virtualized environment. At the same time, the multi-cloud approach lets agencies ramp up during peak demands and come back down when the spike ends. Additionally, the move to hybrid cloud lets agencies manage security risks in a way that shares and disperses the threat. In fact, OMB's Cloud Smart strategy says agencies should be equipped to evaluate their options based on their service and mission needs, technical requirements, and existing policy limitations. Computing and technology decisions should also consider customer impact, balance against cost, cybersecurity risk, and management criteria. Additionally, OMB says in its Cloud Smart strategy that agencies need to weigh long-term inefficiencies of migrating applications as is into the cloud environments against the immediate financial costs of modernizing in advance or replacing them altogether. There's a lot to think about there. And let's add to the fact that agencies will need their industry partners to make this move to the cloud successful. So with that context in place, let's turn to our guest, and she will tell us all about the benefits and potential of hybrid cloud. Tricia Fitzmaurice is the Regional Manager for Federal Law Enforcement and Justice at Red Hat. Tricia, hybrid cloud feels like something we've been talking about now ever since we've been talking about cloud. I think it goes back to maybe 2010, though I guess some of us could argue it goes back to the 90s with the alternative service providers, but we won't go down that path too much. But it's not, so hybrid cloud, not a new term, but there is this growing acceptance, this growing presence of this dual system. Why are agencies in this hybrid world?
Yeah, I would say that, at this point, and as you pointed out, since really 2010, agencies have been have incorporated a hybrid cloud infrastructure in architectural design kind of by default, not necessarily by end state design. Everyone with their managed service providers or their on-premise data centers, started to test out the viability of workloads to sit in a public cloud environment. And now we're seeing, as it's more widely accepted for mission critical workloads to reside in a public cloud, now it's really time for agencies to really carefully look at what their overall hybrid cloud strategy is going to look like and design not just for how it meets mission needs of today, but what their mission needs may be tomorrow.
One of the things that I think OMB has put out in their Cloud Smart strategy, which is a big difference than the Cloud First strategy, was making that decision exactly. Which applications are ready today, which applications could be ready tomorrow, and maybe which will never be ready. And I think that's why that hybrid cloud, as I've heard over the years, agencies will stay in it for maybe a decade or more, and some agencies will never get out of it. Is that the discussion you're having when you talk to your clients in the federal law enforcement and justice world?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a lot more introspection now on workloads. At first, there was a lot of, let's just get to cloud. We need to get to a public cloud. And now we're really seeing that some agencies that have moved to cloud, that maybe that wasn't the best financial decision or really functionality decision based on the workload they may have moved there. And you've seen federal agencies moving workloads back from the cloud and back on premise for a cost savings there, right? So now, when we're looking at it, a cloud strategy is really the most important decision that an IT manager is going to make in the federal space. So designing how they are going to develop a flexible hybrid cloud infrastructure that will enable workload portability becomes very critical. So as they're looking at the workloads that they have legacy today, and maybe making decisions around, does that legacy system make more sense to reside here in a data center, and maybe they don't close the data center they were looking to close, but then also which applications do they look to move and maybe refactor or repurpose, break down into microservices and deploy them out into multiple clouds, but doing so in a way that enables them to be able to have multi-cloud portability.
You bring up the idea of cost savings. I remember when we first started talking about cloud first, it was all about cost savings, cost savings, cost savings. Now I think agencies have been able to step back and say, okay, it's not just cost savings, it's really about the mission side. And that leads them to the decision, okay, what belongs in the cloud and what doesn't, and what types of cloud does this specific application or this mission area belong in? And that really leads us to the discussion around fit for purpose clouds. Let's describe that concept first, and then we can go into why they matter.
Absolutely. I think as public cloud started to come into play in the federal space, it was really I think that it got kind of chunked out where Microsoft workloads were going into Azure, and you had agencies looking at new 12-factor applications and putting those into Amazon because they felt it was easy to get to Amazon. But now you're really seeing, large contract awards like JEDI to Azure. You're looking at that as, now mission-critical workloads are sitting across any public cloud out there. And so now you really have the flexibility of taking a look at, what's the best resource for the job for a particular application that you're looking to move.
And what I've heard is certain clouds are better for certain things. I've heard if you're going to do customer relationship management, you want to be maybe in one cloud over another. Or if you want to do financial management, again, maybe one cloud over the other. Is that still the case? When you, again, talk to clients and talk to agencies, do they get that? Or they're just going, well, I just want to put it in the cloud, and you have to kind of help them, direct them to the proper, what's the fit for purpose cloud?
Yeah, I think that's, there is a mixed bag of that, but I do believe that still most agencies are just trying to figure out how do we get to cloud. I think that the more complex areas of, are specific clouds better at analytics, are specific clouds better at CRM, that remains to be seen, and that really is kind of what's playing out in front of us now. I think that one of the most important factors is the no lock-in. So, just as important as finding the right cloud for the resource that you're looking at deploying, you want to ensure that you're doing it so in such a way that is open standards based and flexible, so that you have the ability that maybe that cloud today in 2019 is the best cloud for that workload, but maybe in 2025 it's not. And you want to have the ability to own your own IT destiny as an agency.
Well, definitely want to go down the path of the interoperability and open standards piece. That's big for Red Hat, we know that. Before we go there, as agencies kind of look at which cloud makes the most sense for them, are there some best practices or are there some trends you're seeing about how to make that decision?
Yeah, so I think that all comes into play as, as any of these agencies that are entering these IT modernization efforts, there really is this upfront part of where are we now? And it's really important for an agency to take stock of where are they, what are their legacy applications look like, what is their desired future state based on the mission needs that they have. And so I think that really is what's dictating it more than necessarily IBM is the best for analytics or Microsoft is the best for email, things along that line. They really have to look at what is the best for our future state mission and the problems we're trying to solve.
And what I'm seeing from agencies when I talk to CIOs and others is that customer, okay, what is the mission? We've heard for years, IT is just an enabler. Well, no, actually IT is the mission,
right.
But it's not the only piece of the mission. So what are you trying to accomplish? What's the outcome? I hear a lot of discussion around outcomes. In the federal law enforcement, that becomes even more important when you talk about Justice Department and DHS and other places as they try to, what are they trying to accomplish? Are you seeing that in whether it's RFPs and RFQs you're reviewing or in RFIs or even just conversations you have that they're asking the right questions to get to that decision of what's the end result we're trying to get to?
Yeah, I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see more flexibility really in not just the linear thought of, which cloud should we reside in. I'd like to see, mission needs are always changing. Help us figure out a pathway to not only get to cloud, not only help realize cost savings in the here and now, but also meet mission in the here and now, but also what do we need to think of 10 years from now? What aren't we thinking of when it comes to workload portability, when it comes to openness and flexibility? I'd like to see more of that kind of, in my opinion, kind of protecting of their future state and their future missions by leaving themselves open for change.
We see that in, for instance, the big telecom network contract that GSA is running called Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions. That's a 15-year contract. So the technology, and GSA has said this, the technology today is not going to be the same technology in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years from now. And that brings us around to this concept you brought up earlier of interoperability, open standards. That's why that is so important. We know Red Hat built its entire business model on this idea of open standards. But when it comes to cloud, that becomes even more important. So you're not just stuck in Microsoft or stuck in Amazon or stuck in IBM.
Absolutely. So, it was even back to 2010, we were, talking about the fact that cloud has the potential to be the mother of all lock-in. And we really, I think that that's very spot on. I liken it to talking about supply chain, logistical supply chain back in the early 2000s, where you saw in the DoD and in the federal space some of the ramifications of outsourcing really key parts of your overall supply chain. And I look at these modernization efforts in IT today, and I think this really is outsourcing a very large part of your supply chain for an IT organization. And so you want to be able to do it in such a way that if it's not meeting the needs in the future, that you have the ability to take that and move that mission critical system to wherever it may be in order to fit what you need that mission, what you need in order to accomplish that mission.
We saw some hiccups early on. I know there's a couple agencies who had moved a financial system into a cloud, and then the company went under, and they had to pay to get their data and their systems back. Are you seeing agencies doing a better job of putting in certain provisions, certain language in contracts to say, we own the data, we own the if you will, the IP that underlies, that lives in the cloud? Or is that, again, part of that learning curve that it's coming, but it's more of a slow roll?
I haven't personally seen that in RFPs to date.
Does that worry you a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I look at it and say, I think that it is. I think you hit it on the nail on the head of that is really part of the learning process. There are things that you just really can't predict, right? Companies going under, companies choosing to move away from a particular mission area of the federal space. There are things that you can't predict that happen out there. But by defining your IT strategy around open standards really does offer you the best protection for that future state that you may not know
how it's going to change, right? And I think that's a big concern as things are changing. One of the other things that comes up around this interoperability and open standards is the idea of portability, right? Mm-hmm. How easy it is to move from one cloud to the other, and I think it goes back to the fit for purpose cloud discussion we had earlier. Is portability the key reason why interoperability and open standards makes the most sense? Because you want to be able to move from cloud A to cloud B, like you and I change cars, right? Today I'm driving a Honda, tomorrow I'm driving a Toyota, but it's still a car.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very important. Workload portability is very important. So is the ability to make it easier for the developers and the operators, right? You want to be able to create a logical plane that can unified platform across all the clouds so that your developers and operators don't have to learn multiple tools just based on the cloud that you're using. So having solutions like that provide that ability to move a workload to any cloud but still give that same level of comfort to your developers and operators becomes very important to speed in terms of supporting your IT mission.
And when you talk about cloud, I was just at a recent conference where someone from DoD spoke, and they said the big issue was speed to capabilities, and that's why the cloud's so important. You make up a great point as well about developers. So we're going to jump into those things in the next segment. First, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.